Supernatural guardianship speaks to the unseen care that surrounds a soul carrying purpose. It is the quiet oversight that intervenes without announcement, the guidance that arrives before danger fully forms, the restraint placed on what would otherwise overreach you. Now, this guardianship does not remove difficulty, it regulates how far difficulty is allowed to go. You still walk through challenge, but the edge is blunted, the timing altered, and the outcome redirected. Thank you for visiting my channel. Welcome. Welcome to Truth Teller's Mic. Let the class begin. The clearest and the most explicit moment in Scripture where God speaks limits to the adversary is found in the book of Job. And now this is not symbolic. It is direct dialogue. Names are given, conditions are stated, boundaries are enforced. The individuals involved are God, Satan, that's the one that I call the adversary in this lesson, and Job, described as blameless and upright, one who feared God and turned away from evil. Now the situation unfolds in Job. I'm just going to give you a little background on it. So when I get into speaking directly about you, you can see where I'm coming from and that it is something that God would do. And so in Job chapter 1, Satan appears before God and accuses Job of serving God only because he is protected. Satan explicitly acknowledges the hedge, saying, this is in Job verse 10, Job chapter 1 verse 10. Have you not put a hedge around him and his house and all that he has on every side? Right? Now this admission matters because the adversary recognizes that Job is inaccessible without divine permission. The protection is already established. Satan cannot breach it on his own. And so then God responds by defining the first limit. And this is in verse 12. He said, behold, all that he has is in your power. Only against him do not stretch out your hand. He gives the adversary permission, but he set limits. Now here the boundary is precise. Satan is allowed to touch Job's possessions, his livelihood, and his external circumstances. He is explicitly forbidden from touching Job himself. Now, the limit is spoken clearly. And so Satan departs from the presence of God, and he operates only within what has been permitted. And after Job loses his wealth and children, yet remains faithful, Satan returns in Job chapter 2, and he presses further. God again sets a boundary, this time allowing a deeper test, but still protecting what must not be destroyed. And some of you may have felt as though your life took on the likeness of Job, but you're still here. And so that's what this teaching is about. And in Job 2, verse 6, God said, behold, he is in your hand, only spare his life. Again, the limit is unmistakable. Satan may afflict Job physically, but he may not take his life. And some of you wonder why you're still here. Because the adversary obeys the restriction. So Job is struck with sores, but he lives. The line is not crossed. This exchange reveals something critical about divine order. Satan does not have unlimited access. He must present himself. He must receive permission. He must operate within spoken constraints. He cannot exceed what God allows, even when intent is destructive. Some of you feel like you've been through so much and you just can't die. And maybe psychologically, this explains why God's people, the chosen, can be deeply tested without being erased. Spiritually, it reveals that protection does not mean the absence of trial, but the regulation of how far the trial may go. The hedge is not removed, it is adjusted with intention. The book of Job shows that God does not argue with the adversary. God governs even the adversary. And limits are not negotiated, they are declared. If you have wondered why hardship reached you but did not finish you, why pressure intensified but stopped short, why loss occurred, maybe some of you were homeless, but your core remained intact. Scripture gives the answer plainly. A boundary was spoken. You were not abandoned, you were measured, and what was allowed for a purpose. What was denied to preserve life, calling, and identity. The adversary knows exactly how far he may go and no further. So let's get deeper into the teaching concerning you. There is a guardianship around you that does not announce itself, not even to you. It does not arrive with drama or demand recognition. It works quietly, firmly, and with intention. You notice it most when something almost happened, but it did not. When a door that looked promising would not open. When your spirit would not cooperate with the direction that seemed reasonable on the surface. This is not confusion, this is care. Supernatural guardianship is not about keeping you comfortable. It is about keeping you intact. You are allowed to feel the tension of the moment, but you are not handed over to what would dismantle you from the inside. There is a boundary around your becoming. Certain experiences are delayed, not because you are unworthy, but because timing matters more than speed. What you carry requires maturity before exposure. Often, this guardianship expresses itself through interruption. Plans dissolve without explanation. Connections weaken without conflict. Opportunities may fade without failure. You may have questioned yourself during these moments, wondering why forward motion felt blocked. What you were sensing was not denial, it was restraint placed lovingly around your path. There is no inner signal that accompanies this protection. Your body reacts before your mind can justify the response. Something tightens, maybe. Something pulls you back. And you cannot explain it in neat terms, yet you know to pause. And this inner refusal, that's what I'm calling it, an inner refusal, is not you being fearful. It is discernment that is trained through unseen sight. This is when your body reacts before your mind can justify the response. It saves you from agreements that would have required you to abandon yourself slowly, maybe. Supernatural guardianship also limits access to you. Not everyone who wants proximity, wants to get close, is permitted entry. Some are kept at a distance without confrontation. Some misunderstand you and drift away. This is not rejection. This is a spiritual filtration system designed to protect God's choice. So what walks beside you must be able to stand without leaning on your strength, creating a weight or draining your focus. You are not here to carry what refuses to stand on its own. You may notice that certain attempts against you lose momentum. Stories collapse, intentions scatter. What was meant to harm you never quite forms. You did not orchestrate this. You did not defend yourself loudly. The restraint happened beyond your effort. This is guardianship deciding what may proceed and what must stop short. Over time, this produces that steadiness in you, allows you to walk firmly and feel as though you have that balance that you need, that you can walk further. You stop forcing outcomes. You stop explaining why you will not rush. You trust the pauses now. You trust them because before you were frustrated. And now you understand that preservation is more valuable than proof. You learn that what belongs with you will arrive without requiring you to override your inner consent. Look back and you will see the pattern. You were sustained when circumstances suggested you should have fractured. You were redirected when persistence would have cost too much. You were held together when giving up would have been understandable. This guardianship is not random. It is not indulgence. It is assignment-based care on God's choice. You are being kept whole because what moves through you, your spiritual gifts and discernment, what moves through you must arrive undistorted. So stay again attentive to the quiet guidance. Honor the interruptions. Think. Sharpen your discernment. Think. Respect those pauses. You are not alone on this path. You are being watched over with intention. He sends an entire lineage your way, and that care has not loosened its hold on you. There are lives that are not left to chance, and that is you. And it's not because your life is easier, but because they are consequential. If you are here, it is not because curiosity led you here. It is because something in you already knows there has been an unseen hand steadying your course. This class, this lesson is not meant to convince you. It is meant to name what you already lived but may not yet have language for. And it is supernatural guardianship. It is not fantasy. It is not superstition. And it is not escape from reality. It is the psychological and spiritual oversight that governs certain lives so that purpose is not prematurely distorted. It is the reason danger pauses. It is the reason certain paths never fully open. It is the reason your spirit refuses cooperation when your mind says, this makes sense. And you are not being managed, you are being preserved. When the whole world treats us cold, God brings on the heat. We are always loved. Guardianship itself works slowly. It does not rush revelation. It waits for your readiness. Supernatural guardianship begins before there's a conscious awareness. So you're protected from birth. And long before you knew how to name your difference and say, wait, maybe I have a gift here, there was already regulation around you. You were allowed to experience difficulty, but not annihilation. You were exposed to pain, but not erased. That distinction matters. Many mistake guardianship for exemption. It is not. You still encounter hardship, misunderstanding, and even delay. What is different is the proportion. The harm is measured. The losses are contained. Keeps you from going crazy. The setbacks do not consume your core. And this is why you may look back and realize how certain moments came to derailing everything. Maybe you were admitted into a mental institution, yet somehow it did not. Something intervened without all the fanfare and spectacle. Timing was altered for you. And people who needed to exit, that saw you in dire circumstances and gossiped about you, but didn't lend a hand or reach for you, those people exited. Some of them believe it was their idea. So be it. Circumstances collapsed on their own, even when you were not in your right mind, even when you were homeless, even when you felt you had zero resources, even when you felt you could not speak up. Guardianship often works through removal rather than rescue. While you were going through it, God was around, had your lineage around you, just picking people off. See, psychologically, this creates an unusual tension. You grow up sensing that consequences exist, but noticing you are not handled the same way as others. This can create confusion and even guilt sometimes. You may have wondered why you survived what destroyed someone else, why you were redirected while others were forced to learn through collapse. Guardianship is not preference, it is function-based care. When you take guardianship over anyone, it is a function-based care. What is protected is not comfort. It is not reputation or ease. What is protected is what must remain intact to fulfill its role later. And that is called humanity. The most overlooked aspect of guardianship is internal restraint. You are stopped from the inside before you are stopped from the outside. Your body signals refusal before logic catches up. You feel heaviness in your chest, tightening in your gut, or sudden loss of enthusiasm where excitement should be. This is not anxiety, because anxiety scatters. But this signal, what you experience, it centers you. It tells you, not this, not this, not now, and not this way. And this can be disorienting. You may appear cautious or difficult to others. You may even question yourself. But over time, you notice a pattern. Every time you override this signal, the cost is immediate. Every time you honor it, clarity returns. You soon learn why. And it's like you wipe the sweat from your brow saying, thank you, God. This inner restraint is part of your guardianship system. It is trained through experience, disappointment, and survival. It protects you from agreements that would have required you to abandon yourself slowly rather than be harmed outright. You are spared certain lessons because you are not meant to learn them the hard way. That does not make you superior. It makes you responsible. And this is why impatience feels especially destabilizing for you. When you rush, you step outside the protected boundary. When you pause, you return to it. One of the most painful expressions of guardianship is interruptions. Doors may close without explanation. Relationships dissolve without conflict. Opportunities vanish right before fruition. And to the untrained eye, this looks like failure. To the guarded life, it is protection that is disguised as loss. Your guardian is protecting you. You are not being denied. You were being spared an exchange that would have drained you over time. See, some environments would have benefited from you more than you would have benefited from them, because guardianship corrects this imbalance before it becomes bondage. As a parent corrects imbalances before their child ends up in bondage to something. And this is also why access to you is regulated. Not everyone who seeks closeness is allowed to remain. Some people misunderstand you deeply and they leave. They don't believe you are worth their time. You are worth their friendship. You are not even worth their hand in marriage. They didn't even want to raise a kid with you. They would rather give that child someone else's name. But others project onto you and lose interest when you do not perform as they need you to. You do not perform as expected. Now, this is filtration and it is not abandonment. You see it as abandonment, but it is not. And this can produce seasons of isolation. Now you're alone. So spiritually, it preserves your integrity. God knows what you don't. And you are not here to be consumed by proximity seekers, those that want to get close to you because it's something you have they would like you to share. or hand over or allow them access to. You are here to walk beside those who can stand without leaning on your strength, creating a weight on you, drag you down, hold you down, slow you down. You may also notice that attempts against you rarely land clean. Accusations lose traction, plans unravel. What was intended to corner you dissolves on its own. You did not orchestrate this, of course. You did not defend yourself loudly, of course. The restraint occurred beyond your effort. That is guardianship deciding what may proceed and what must stop short. As guardianship matures you, something shifts. You stop chasing explanations. You stop forcing timing. You stop reopening doors just to prove you can walk through them. You go back because this time you're going to show them. You're going back because you want to prove something. The way you begin is to value your preservation over being validated by anything outside of you. You no longer need chaos to feel alive. All that drama, let it go. You no longer need the pressure. You don't feel the pressure to feel important. You understand that what belongs with you will not require you to override your inner agreement. And this produces the steadiness within you. Spiritually, it produces authority. You move differently. You wait without anxiety now. You decline without the guilt. You trust pauses that once frustrated you. You want to move forward. You want to accept it. Everything looks good, but something inside you say, don't do it. Don't do it. It's not worth it. I said no. And you find yourself, you want to argue with God because it looks like it's the answer to your prayers. But you listen and you're frustrated with God, but you move on from it because you trust the voice that you hear. And looking back, the pattern becomes undeniable. You were held together when circumstances suggested collapse would have been reasonable. You were redirected when persistence would have cost too much. Keep knocking at that same door to make it work. You're trying to make something work. You're trying to push it through. You demand to be accepted. You demand for others to see you fully. But God is saying here, sweetheart, it would have cost you too much. I love you. You are my heart. I don't need you to force anyone to accept you. You are accepted and approved at the highest level, beyond anyone's horizon. I love you, whole and intact. And so you were kept intact while others were broken by experiences you were never meant to endure. This guardianship is not loosening its hold on you. It is preparing you to cooperate with it consciously. Supernatural guardianship is not a theory. It is a lived pattern. It explains the near misses, the sudden endings, the inner refusals, and the unearned survivals. You were not lucky, you were being kept all along. You are on a regulated path, and you cannot be late as long as you remain on the path. What is arriving in your life requires you to still be whole when it comes. That is why you were protected before you understood why. Honor what has watched over you by listening now. Respect those pauses. Trust the inner restraint. Let what leaves leave. Let what cannot reach you remain distant. You are not walking alone. You never were. Supernatural guardianship is the unseen care that preserves your wholeness rather than your comfort, that works through timing, interruption, and inner restraint instead of spectacle. That's why no one knows who you are. It explains why certain doors never open, why some connections dissolve without confrontation, and why your spirit would not cooperate even when logic argued otherwise. You were looking weird to others. Like I would have never turned that down. And so what you carry is protected from being exposed too early. So delay is not denial and solitude is not abandonment. Your inner hesitation is discernment and it is not fear. And honoring it keeps you within protection. Access to you is regulated because closeness must never drain your purpose. If any relationship or any membership or family or environment, it drains you from honoring what keeps you, reconsider. There were near misses, there were sudden endings and quiet redirections that reveal oversight deciding what may proceed and what must stop short. Trusting the pauses bring grounded confidence. That grounded confidence is the steadiness that I spoke of, that I speak of. You are grounded in confidence. And so while forcing outcomes weakens your path, you're spending energy trying to force others to do it your way, to accept you. I'm going to fight for my rights. I'm going to be accepted. You're chosen. You don't have to. You were kept intact because what must arrive in your life requires you to be whole. Access to you is regulated because closeness must never drain your purpose. Not everyone who approaches you is meant to remain near you, and they may not intentionally befriend you because their intent is to siphon off you. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. But some are drawn to your insight, your presence, your grounded confidence, your ability to carry depth. But proximity does not equal permission. Guardianship limits who can stay close so that your inner life is not slowly depleted by demands, expectations, or unspoken dependency. This regulation often happens without confrontation. People will fade, and you may wonder, whatever happened to such and such, right? You know, it wasn't any bad blood, no communication issues. It's like people just fade away because the dynamics change. And so invitations may stop coming. What once felt mutual no longer sustains itself. And this is not loss, it is protection, removing unnecessary extraction. You are not meant to be a resource others draw from without responsibility. What walks beside you must bring its own substance. When access is restricted, you may feel alone for a season. That solitude is not punishment, by no means. It is restoration of inner authority. It teaches you to recognize when closeness feels clean and when it quietly takes more than it gives. Over time, you learn that genuine connection does not exhaust you or require you to abandon yourself. Guardianship ensures that what remains near you can stand without leaning on your strength, right? I mentioned that a few times. This is when someone becomes a drain to you. And so those who are meant to walk with you will not need to consume your energy to feel secure. They will meet you with mutual presence, not quiet depletion. You are wealthy in a spiritual way. And this is why wealthy individuals are not going to go move into the hood and others know that they're wealthy because they will drain their assets and their resources. Because in that environment, a lot of help is needed. A lot of resources are needed, right? Supernatural guardianship is often misunderstood as favoritism. It is not. It is function-based care. Certain lives carry work that cannot survive prolonged exposure to environments that demand compromise, right? Environments that cause an extreme amount of stress, maybe. Because of this, oversight appears early, often before you can name it, before you understand what it is. You know it happens, but you just really can't understand it, right? And you may remember moments when trouble circled you, but never quite landed. Situations that should have escalated simply ended. Conflicts dissolved without your effort. People who meant harm lost interest or lost access. And this was not luck, it was limitation that was placed on what was permitted to touch you. You were still allowed to feel pain. You were still allowed to experience disappointment, but there was a boundary. You could approach the edge without being pushed over it. This creates confusion early in life, especially when you compare your experiences to others who were not spared in the same way. This is where misplaced guilt can form. You may have wondered why you survived what devastated someone else. You may have been born into a family where there was a lot of hardship and others were devastated by it, but for somehow your core was kept intact and you survived whole. Also, why your life redirected while another collapsed. Guardianship answers this quietly. Not every life is handled the same way because not every life carries the same responsibility. One of the most reliable signs of guardianship is inner refusal. This is not fear based avoidance. Fear scatters the mind and it agitates the body. Inner refusal is different. It is calm, it is firm, and it is non negotiable. No matter how many ways you figure out you can do it anyway, you still can't be at ease with the decision. You feel it when enthusiasm disappears without warning. It was something you were working on or doing, and you were just so into it, you were hyped up, and then all of a sudden, you're not interested. When your body tightens despite logical reassurance that it's okay, when something that once excited you suddenly feels wrong to continue, this is not confusion. It is a boundary being enforced from within. Now, this can be difficult to trust. You may have been taught to override your innocence in favor of the reason, the approval from others, or consistency. It was something that you've always done. So, or a natural reaction, innate reaction. Yet every time you ignored this signal, the cost was immediate. Every time you honored it, you were spared an entanglement that would have taken far more than it gave. Inner refusal is part of your guardianship system. It keeps you from entering agreements that would slowly deplete you. It prevents you from staying too long in places where your presence would be consumed rather than valued. To others, it may appear that you're walking away prematurely, but you know that you were never valued. And learning to respect this inner signal restores self-trust. You stop forcing yourself to participate in what no longer fits. You stop explaining your withdrawal. You stop arguing with what your inner life already knows. Guardianship also governs who is allowed proximity. Access to you is regulated because closeness must never drain your purpose. This is why not everyone who approaches you is permitted to remain near you. Some are drawn to your insight. Some are drawn to your depth. Some are drawn to what your presence provides. You give them the confidence that they cannot seem to muster up inside them on their own. So standing beside you gives them confidence. But proximity does not equal permission. Those who seek to lean onto you without standing are quietly removed. This often happens without confrontation. People will fade. Dynamics will weaken. Familiar connections no longer sustain themselves. And you may grieve these endings naturally, right? Especially when no wrongdoing is obvious. But yet, over time, you realize the truth. Remaining would have required you to give more than was being returned. Guardianship ensures that your inner life is not slowly emptied through obligations, expectations, or unspoken dependency. It filters who can walk beside you without consuming what you need to carry forward. This filtration can produce seasons of solitude. And that solitude is not punishment, it is you recovering. Your inner authority is returning. And it teaches you how to recognize when closeness feels clean and when it quietly takes more than it gives. As you mature, something changes. You stop fighting redirection. You stop reopening doors just to prove you could. You stop mistaking delay for failure. You begin to understand that timing matters more than speed. You no longer chase outcomes that require you to override your inner agreement. You no longer feel compelled to explain your pauses. You trust that what belongs with you will arrive without requiring self-betrayal. And this cooperation brings a grounded confidence. You move without panic. You wait without anxiety. You decline without guilt. You allow endings to complete without dragging them forward for closure. And looking back, the pattern becomes undeniable. You were held together when collapse would have been understandable. You were redirected when persistence would have cost too much. You were kept intact for reasons that are only now becoming visible. Supernatural guardianship does not end as you grow older. It becomes more collaborative. You learn how to listen. You learn how to respond. You learn how to stay within what protects you rather than pushing beyond it. You were never alone on this path. The interruptions, the refusals, the closed doors, and the sudden endings were not random. They were evidence of care operating beyond your effort. Honor what was watched over you by listening now. Respect what pulls you back. Let what leaves leave. Let what cannot reach you remain distant. You are being kept because what is meant to arrive in your life requires you whole. Thank you for visiting my channel. May your soul continue to be blessed. Stay conscious, stay covered, stay undefeated. And I'll see you on the next one. Bye.